The dog growled at the child every night. What was behind this unsettling behavior? Was it mere instinct or something deeper, more ominous? Join us on a journey filled with mystery, tension, and heartwarming revelations as a family uncovers a truth they never expected. Noah carefully opened the front door, stepping inside with a small bundle wrapped snugly in his arms. Grace followed closely behind, her movements cautious and deliberate, as though the weight of the moment demanded reverence. Their newborn son, Liam, let out a soft coo, a sound so delicate it seemed to echo in the quiet house. The couple exchanged a glance, equal parts exhaustion and wonder, silently acknowledging the shift in their lives. Max, their German shepherd, trotted into the hallway, ears perked and tail wagging. His usual playful energy was tempered by a new curiosity as he approached the couple. Noah knelt, lowering the bundle slightly. "Max, meet Liam," he said softly. The dog sniffed cautiously, then sat, his amber eyes steady and calm. He seemed to understand the importance of this small being now at the center of their lives. The first few days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries. Noah and Grace navigated the rhythm of parenthood with tentative steps, their days anchored by Liam's needs. Max, however, adapted quickly. The dog had always been loyal and protective, but now he rarely strayed far from the nursery. He would settle near Liam's crib, his head resting on his paws, his gaze ever watchful. At first, they found his behavior endearing. Grace snapped photos of Max lying near the crib, sharing them with friends who commented on the bond already forming between dog and baby. But as the weeks passed, Max's actions began to shift. In the evenings, as the house grew quieter and the shadows deepened, he would rise from his spot and position himself in front of the crib. His ears would twitch, his body tense, and a low, soft growl would rumble in his chest. It wasn't an aggressive growl, more a warning, a signal of unease. Noah noticed it first, pausing one night as he passed the nursery. "What's bothering you, boy?" he asked, kneeling beside Max and stroking his fur. The dog's gaze was fixed on the far corner of the room. Noah followed his line of sight but saw nothing out of the ordinary. The corner held a small bookshelf, a rocking chair, and a few toys, nothing that should provoke such a response. Over the next several nights, Max's growls continued. They were never loud, never frantic, but always directed at that same corner. Noah checked the room repeatedly, inspecting for signs of pests or anything else that might explain the behavior. He found nothing. Grace, initially dismissive of Max's actions, began to feel uneasy. "Maybe he's just adjusting," she said one night, though her tone betrayed her doubt. The atmosphere in the nursery began to change, subtle but undeniable. The room, once warm and inviting, seemed heavier in the evenings. Max's vigilance only added to the sense of unease, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Noah and Grace couldn't shake the feeling that their gentle protector knew something they didn't. As the days turned into weeks, Max's behavior became impossible to ignore. Every evening, just as the light began to fade, he would position himself near Liam's crib, his body tense, ears flicking at sounds only he seemed to hear. His soft growls, steady and deliberate, filled the quiet nursery with an unsettling undercurrent. Grace stood in the doorway one evening, her arms crossed as she watched the dog. "It's strange, isn't it? He's never acted like this before," she said, her voice low, as though she didn't want to disturb Max. Noah nodded from his place on the floor, where he was examining the corner Max always fixated on. "It's not like him, but I can't find anything. No pests, no loose boards, nothing out of place." He tapped the wall lightly, listening for hollow sounds, but the structure seemed solid. Grace frowned, stepping closer and brushing her hand against the cool draft that seemed to originate from the corner. "It's always colder here. Maybe something's wrong with the insulation." Her words were hesitant, almost as though she didn't fully believe them. She crouched beside Noah, watching as he ran his fingers along the baseboards. Max didn't move, his eyes locked on the same spot, It's like he knows something we don't, Grace murmured, reaching out to pat Max's head. The dog leaned into her touch briefly, then resumed his watchful stance. As the days passed, the draft in the nursery became more noticeable, chilling the room even during the warmer afternoons. Grace took to bundling Liam more tightly, her unease growing with every soft growl from Max. One evening, as they prepared Liam for bed, Grace hesitated. "Do you think he's trying to tell us something? What if we're missing something important?" Her voice trembled slightly, a mixture of fear and frustration. Noah sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Grace. I've checked everything. Walls, floors, ceiling. I don't know what else to look for." He glanced at Max, who was once again staring at the same corner, his tail stiff, his body coiled like a spring. "But it's starting to get to me too." That night, the tension reached a breaking point. Noah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. The draft, the growling, the unease that seemed to settle over the nursery every evening. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve. Around midnight, Max let out a low, guttural growl, louder than usual, startling Noah and Grace awake. They rushed to the nursery, hearts pounding. Max stood rigid, his hackles raised, his growl unwavering. He glanced back at them briefly, his expression almost pleading, before returning his focus to the corner. Grace clutched Liam tighter as Noah knelt beside Max, trying to calm him. "What is it, boy? What are you trying to tell us?" The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered but deeply felt. The following morning, Noah decided it was time to seek professional help. The unease in the nursery, combined with Max's relentless fixation on the corner, weighed heavily on his mind. Grace agreed, her anxiety growing with every passing day. They called a home inspector, a seasoned professional named Mr. Carter, to examine the room. When Mr. Carter arrived, Max greeted him with a wag of his tail but quickly returned to his spot near Liam's crib, his gaze never straying from the same corner. "Interesting dog you've got there," Mr. Carter remarked with a curious smile. "He seems to know something we don't." Noah led the inspector to the nursery, explaining Max's unusual behavior and the persistent draft Grace had noticed. Mr. Carter nodded thoughtfully, pulling out his tools and beginning a meticulous inspection. First, everything seemed normal. He tapped on the walls, checked the windows for leaks, and examined the floorboards for signs of damage. As he worked, Noah and Grace hovered anxiously nearby, their nerves taut. Max remained in his usual spot, his body tense, watching every move. It wasn't until Mr. Carter began inspecting the corner of the room that his expression changed. "There's definitely something off here," he muttered, running his hand along the base of the wall. "Do you see these faint stains? They're usually a sign of water damage." He pulled out a moisture meter and pressed it against the wall. The device beeped sharply, confirming his suspicions. Grace instinctively tightened her hold on Liam, her heart pounding. "Water damage?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mr. Carter nodded grimly. "It could be a small leak, but we won't know the extent until we open up the wall." With their permission, Mr. Carter carefully removed a section of drywall. What lay behind it made everyone pause. The wood framing inside was darkened and soft to the touch, evidence of extensive water damage. Mold spores clung to the surface, and the faint musty odor became more pronounced. Noah's stomach turned as he realized how close they had been to letting this problem go unnoticed. "This beam here," Mr. Carter pointed to a rotting support beam, "is in bad shape. If this had gone unchecked much longer, it could have caused serious structural issues. In extreme cases, partial collapse isn't out of the question." Grace's face paled, and she instinctively stepped back, clutching Liam tightly. Noah felt a cold sweat break out as the weight of the discovery settled over him. "How could we not have known?" he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Mr. Carter glanced at Max, who remained fixed on the corner. "Animals can sense things like this. Smells, vibrations, even subtle changes in the environment. Your dog likely picked up on it long before it became apparent to humans. Noah knelt beside Max, stroking his fur with a mixture of gratitude and awe. You've been trying to warn us all along, haven't you, boy? The days following the inspection were a whirlwind of activity and mounting stress. Repairs to the nursery began almost immediately, but the extent of the damage was greater than Noah and Grace had anticipated. Contractors arrived with equipment to remove the rotting beam, replace damaged wood, and treat the mold that had spread behind the walls. The smell of chemicals and the sound of hammering filled the house, a constant reminder of how close they had come to disaster. Grace carried Liam into the living room, where they had set up a temporary space to care for him. The nursery was sealed off for safety, and every time Grace passed the closed door, a shiver ran down her spine. She couldn't help but imagine the worst-case scenario. What might have happened if Max hadn't alerted them? The financial strain became evident quickly. The repair costs were far beyond what they had budgeted for, and every invoice brought a new wave of anxiety. Noah spent late nights poring over their finances, trying to balance bills while ensuring they had enough to cover the mounting expenses. Grace, exhausted from caring for Liam and navigating the upheaval, found herself growing short-tempered. Arguments between the two became more frequent, though they were always followed by quiet apologies. Max remained a steady presence, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos around them. He seemed to sense the tension in the house, often lying near Grace or Noah when they were overwhelmed, offering silent reassurance. One evening, as the contractors wrapped up for the day, Noah sank into the couch, his head in his hands. "I don't know how we're going to keep this up," he admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. Grace sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out," she said softly, though her own doubt lingered in her tone. "Max saved us from something far worse. We have to remember that." Her words hung in the air, a fragile thread of hope they both clung to. Across the room, Max lifted his head, his amber eyes meeting theirs. It was as if he understood the weight of their gratitude. As the repairs progressed, the house began to feel less like a construction zone and more like a home again. The contractors replaced the damaged beam with a sturdy new one, reinforced the walls, and installed better insulation to prevent future issues. Grace took comfort in watching the transformation, though the financial burden remained an ever-present shadow. Despite everything, she couldn't shake her growing appreciation for Max. The thought of his unwavering vigilance, night after night, filled her with gratitude. She often found herself sitting beside him, running her fingers through his fur, as if trying to convey the depth of her thanks. By the time the repairs were complete, the nursery was more beautiful and secure than it had ever been. Max, no longer growling at the corner, seemed satisfied. He returned to his usual spot near Liam's crib, lying peacefully as though his mission had been accomplished. With the repairs finally complete, Noah and Grace moved Liam back into the nursery. The room felt entirely transformed. Its fresh paint, reinforced walls, and newly installed insulation gave it a warmth and security that had been missing for weeks. Grace arranged Liam's crib carefully in its original spot, placing the mobile above it as Max lay nearby, watching intently. For the first time in a long while, the nursery felt safe again, yet the memory of what had been uncovered lingered in their minds. Max, now calm and quiet, resumed his spot near Liam's crib each evening, his vigilance unchanged but without the low growls that had haunted the household. Curious about how Max had detected the danger, Noah decided to consult their veterinarian. During the appointment, he described the dog's behavior, detailing how Max had growled at the same corner of the room for weeks until the problem was found. The vet nodded knowingly. "Dogs have an incredible ability to pick up on things we can't. It could have been the faint smell of mold, vibrations from the weakened structure, or even the changes in airflow. Your Max was sensing something that told him the environment wasn't right, and he did exactly what a good guardian would. He let you know." Hearing this only deepened Noah's appreciation for Max. On the way home, he stopped at a pet store and picked out a new chew toy and a thick, comfortable bed as a way to thank him. When he arrived back, Grace smiled at the sight of the gifts. "He deserves it," she said, watching Max eagerly sniff the new toy. "If it weren't for him, I don't even want to think about what could have happened." As the days passed, life in the house began to settle back into its familiar rhythm. Liam giggled and cooed in his crib, oblivious to the dangers that had once loomed over him. Max, ever the guardian, spent his days following Grace around the house and his nights lying near Liam, his body relaxed but always alert. Grace often found herself sitting beside Max during quiet moments, stroking his fur and murmuring soft words of gratitude. She couldn't help but feel that their bond with him had grown stronger, forged by the trials they had faced together. One evening, as Noah and Grace sat on the couch after putting Liam to bed, they reflected on how close they had come to disaster. "Max didn't just save Liam," Noah said thoughtfully. "He saved all of us. Our home, our sense of safety, everything." Grace nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "He's not just our dog. He's our protector, our family." Across the room, Max lay quietly, his eyes half closed but his ears twitching at the faint sounds of the night. It was clear to both of them that his role in their lives went far beyond companionship. By now, Max had become more than a pet. He was a steadfast presence, a symbol of loyalty and devotion. Watching him settle back into his peaceful routine, Noah and Grace knew their home was safe, not just because of the repairs, but because of the unwavering vigilance of their gentle guardian. The weeks following the repairs brought a sense of normalcy back to the household. Liam grew more animated each day, his giggles filling the house with warmth. Grace and Noah finally began to breathe easier, their initial anxiety replaced by a deep gratitude for their home and the safety it now provided. Yet, it was Max who remained at the center of their hearts, his quiet vigilance a constant reminder of how close they had come to disaster. The story of Max's unusual behavior and his role in uncovering the hidden danger became a tale they often shared with friends and neighbors. People listened with fascination, many remarking on the extraordinary instincts of animals and the unique bond between humans and their pets. Max quickly became somewhat of a local hero, his story spreading beyond their immediate circle. Neighbors would stop by with treats or simply to pet him, their admiration evident. Despite the attention, Max remained the same loyal, unassuming companion, always keeping a watchful eye on Liam. One afternoon, as Noah watched Max lying by Liam's crib, he felt a deep sense of awe. Max's actions had gone beyond what anyone could expect from a dog, demonstrating a level of devotion and intuition that left him humbled. He sat beside Max, scratching behind his ears. "You're more than just a good boy," Noah murmured. "You're family." Max thumped his tail once in response, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they shared. Grace, too, found herself reflecting on Max's impact. She often wondered what might have happened if he hadn't been there, if his growls had been dismissed or ignored. That thought alone was enough to bring tears to her eyes. She began keeping a small journal to record moments of Max's life, from the first time he met Liam to the nights he stood guard. It was her way of preserving his legacy, ensuring that his contribution to their family would never be forgotten. As Liam grew, he and Max became inseparable. Liam's small hands would reach for Max, pulling at his fur or clinging to his ears as he learned to stand. Max endured it all with infinite patience, often licking Liam's hand or nudging him gently when he stumbled. Their bond was effortless, a pure and simple connection built on trust and affection. It warmed Grace and Noah to see Liam crawling after Max, the two of them sharing a world only they seemed to understand. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Noah watched Liam toddling unsteadily towards Max. The dog remained still, his amber eyes watching the boy carefully. When Liam reached him, he threw his tiny arms around Max's neck, giggling as Max nuzzled him gently. The sight brought a lump to Noah's throat. "He'll never know what Max did for him," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Grace leaned into him, her eyes glistening. "But we'll always know, and we'll make sure he does someday." The house was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that spoke of peace. As Noah and Grace checked on Liam one last time, they found Max lying by the crib, his eyes closed but his ears perked, ever alert. In that moment, they knew their home was more than safe. It was protected by a guardian whose loyalty and love would never waver. The story of Max reminds us of the extraordinary bond between humans and animals, a connection built on trust, loyalty, and an innate ability to sense danger. Max's unwavering vigilance not only saved a family from potential disaster, but also demonstrated how much our furry companions quietly do for us. It's a testament to the idea that love and protection often come in unexpected forms, teaching us to trust the instincts of those who care for us, even when we don't fully understand them. Thank you for joining us on this journey of trust, resilience, and the quiet heroism of a loyal dog. If the story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales that celebrate the extraordinary connections in our lives. Stay tuned for the next story, and thank you for being part of our community.